Hey, it's Ethan here. So in this video, I'm going to be walking you through how you can find qualified leads through LinkedIn Sales Navigator. Now, this is really important whether you have LinkedIn Sales Navigator or not, or perhaps you're using it but not really seeing much results from it. I want to basically walk you through how I use it, how I use it for my clients, so that you can see better results. So the first thing I'll do is I'll basically walk you through a list that I've made for one of my newer clients, which I'm onboarding. And for context, this person basically is a career coach, career slash sort of realignment coach, where he basically helps people in their early 20s and early 30s who, perhaps have sort of got into a pretty good job role or perhaps promoted quite well. However, it's not really fulfilling them as much, perhaps there's misalignment. And so basically he helps them with that. So I want to walk you through what I've basically done for this person, and then we can sort of go into that. So the first thing I've done in terms of the company headcount is 11 to 50. This is pretty much because I believe that a lot of these people who are actually getting into these roles are probably going to be in the company headcount like this. Um, Obviously, I could add more. At the moment, I'd rather deal with a smaller list 'cause at the moment I've got 902. And if I feel like, based on what I've been testing, maybe in terms of connections, outreach, that sort of thing, if I feel like things need to change, I can obviously change that as opposed to adding everyone here or a lot of people here and then going from there. But that's pretty much all I would add on the company side of things, unless you specifically target people who worked from a certain place or something like that, or perhaps if you really specifically target one certain type of company type, then obviously you can do that. But I don't usually worry so much about anything else. Company headcount is just useful to very easily, identify, well, it's a good way to, qualify for things like budget and whatever. I mean, if you target specifically businesses, then, you know, obviously it can very much depend. But typically speaking, obviously, the bigger the company headcount, the bigger the budget it likely is going to be. But depending on who you're targeting, can also make it a bit more difficult in order to get in touch with people as well. So it all very much depends on sort of what you target. I don't do anything with buyer intent. I basically sort of leave that. Then, in terms of sort of best path in terms of connections, I'll have this as sort of second degree. This is just pretty much because I mean these people are, well, based on my sort of connections are probably going to be a bit more likely to connect and respond or whatever. Sometimes if the list is a bit too small, I add third degree connections, which obviously bumped up the list quite a bit. But generally speaking, it's not a huge issue. I just usually add third connections if that's something that needs to get bumped up. Generally speaking, I'm not going to do anything else with this either. The next thing is in recent updates. So post on LinkedIn is a no-brainer for me. Pretty much all this is that someone has pretty much gone and they are basically posted within the last 30 days. Um, and this just basically means they're going to be more likely to see that connection request, see that message, respond, and so on and so forth. As for example, if I take it off, you'll see, I've now got 2,000, which is obviously a lot more people. However, there will definitely be people which would have made an account on LinkedIn and then either uninstalled LinkedIn or never touched it ever again. And obviously, it's just going to be a waste of time dealing with these people. So I'd rather deal with people which are more likely to be active. Then from there, we have current job titles. So for this person, I basically filtered for different types of managers, analysts. We've got a like user experience designer in there, researcher. The sort of job titles which are more likely going to be things that people in perhaps early 20s, maybe early 30s will have gotten into, sort of thinking that this is the stuff that they want to do, perhaps requires a bit more creativity and whatever, but ended up, or perhaps is a bit misaligning. So I basically got those there. Obviously I can add more. That's obviously possible. Whenever I am filtering for job titles, typically speaking, I want to filter obviously for only the relevant ones, but what you can also do is you can also exclude. So for example, like if you ever wanted to exclude founder or something, let's say you were targeting to CEOs, then I would usually look to include CEO and then exclude things, because I find sometimes, especially if you are filtering with just say like industry or function, being able to exclude certain things can also be quite useful just to prevent them from popping up. But yeah, the current job title is usually pretty useful. Well, is very useful for me. The like when I'm targeting things, typically speaking, the current job title is going to be different types of sort of B2B coaches. So executive coach, leadership coach, like performance coach. Those sort of things. Business coach, so that I'm actually targeting the right people as well. So that's obviously really useful as well. In terms of workflows, I don't touch this. Obviously, some people might. I usually don't sort of bother with this. In terms of seniority level, you can sort of filter for these and you can do that if you really want to. I often find that, generally speaking, if you filtered for job titles and industries well enough, you don't really need to fuss with it. But that's obviously something you can play around with. But yeah, uh, sort of like past job title, that's obviously, unless you sort of help people, who were in a certain job, and that's obviously that. Then we have years in current company, years in current position. Now, these are actually really useful depending on what it is that you sort of do. So, for example, for me, if I go and show you my sort of sales navigator list at the moment, what I've basically got is I've got years in current position from 1 to 2 years, 3 to 5 years, and 6 to 10 years. Because the reason being is that if I'm obviously trying to help people with lead generation, I don't want to help people who have literally just started their business. So, just under a year, because chances are they're still trying to set things up. They probably, less likely to have the budget and such. But most importantly, I probably don't want to be dealing with coaches who have more than 10 years into their business. Why? Because a lot of these coaches probably are, very heavily relying on things like referrals, their network, and or just, perhaps have a pretty good system in place. And so it's like they're less likely to then go and need it. So in this case, obviously, that's why I've sort of filtered for the years in current position there. So that's sort of one thing which, depending effectively on what it is that you're offering, is something you can consider. Then in terms of the geography, well, it's a no-brainer, right? Like obviously target the people where you sort of think they're going to be. For me, it typically, going to be maybe things like the UK, maybe the US. I've heard some things about when it comes to coaching, people in the US are more are more open to being coached than people in the UK. Heard that a few times. That's obviously completely down to the individual, but yeah. Then in terms of the industry, so what I've done here, because my client doesn't necessarily specifically have an industry they target, what I focus on doing is excluding industries where I effectively just don't want to target, right? And this is really useful because if you're someone that maybe doesn't have an industry specific client, or sorry, industry specific ideal client, then this is quite useful to do. If I go and show you my sort of list, generally speaking, right? I mean, obviously, like I said before, right? I've got the current job title, the different coaches, but what I've also done is I've also excluded lots. You probably don't need to exclude this many, but obviously, I want to avoid probably people which might come under marketing and advertising services and whatever, because that's obviously similar to sort of what I'm currently doing. If you have certain industry that you do target, right? So this could be businesses and like consulting services, or what you can do is you can do professional training and coaching. Those are typically the sort of the big industry which I'll tend to target sometimes. But that's pretty much that. Then you have first name, last name, and such. Um, what you can do if you target more so, for example, males or females, you can actually filter um, for more of those names, right? So, for example, for me, on my sort of list in the first name, as you can see there, I've got lots of common male names because I because I sort of just prefer working with sort of male coaches and such. Now, this isn't perfect, right? But sometimes this can actually help get more in front of the right people. I typically find this sort of works, a bit better, like earlier down the list. Um, but sometimes that can help. Nothing crazy though, but yeah. Then we also have profile language, which obviously whatever that is. But then you also got years of experience. Now this was really important for this client because years of experience effectively being, they add up all of the years of experience that that person has, and that's obviously going to come out as whatever it is. And so, there's multiple things you can do here, right? You got less than 1 year, 1 to 2, more than 10 years, and obviously 3 to 5 and 6 to 10. So what I've done here is that because this client targets people in the early 20s, sort of mid 30s such, I don't really want to be doing more than 10 years because these people are more than likely going to be probably, I don't know, at least above sort of their 30s, so 40 plus. And typically speaking, also probably aren't going to be more likely to be dealing with that problem. But the most important thing being is that they're probably not in their 20s or 30s. So I basically set it as 3 to 5 and 6 to 10. And I mean, in terms of the list I've got here, I'd say most of these people look like they're pretty much in their 20s or 30s. So I'm pretty happy with that. And that's pretty much what I've got for this person at the list. Now, ideally speaking, in terms of a list, I'm looking for, between maybe, I don't know, 1,500 to 3,000 or something. But it doesn't necessarily matter so much. Obviously, you want to make sure you've got a good list to deal with. And I think as long as you've got something to start with, then you can obviously change it up, right? So, for example, if I feel like I'm sort of running out of people from this list, I can always do third degree connections as well, or remove second degree and just add third degree, whatever's sort of easiest. And that's going to be more ideal. And yeah, so that's pretty much the approach that I would take when putting together a LinkedIn Sales Navigator list. Now what would I do from here? Well, what I'd do from here is I'd basically take this list and I'd start sending connection requests, probably about 20 to 30 every single day, Monday to Friday. It's going to take about maybe 4 minutes a day, but it's going to start getting me in front of my effectively my ideal client. Now, obviously, it's also really important that your profile is very clear, right? It's very clear in terms of who you help, what you do, and how you do it, that sort of thing, and your offer and such. And then from there, once they've actually accepted those connection requests, that's when you want to start the conversation, right? You ideally want to effectively make make the first move. But obviously, that's stuff that you like I talk about in other videos. But just in this video, I want to just show you what it is that I sort of focus on with the sort of list in terms of years of experience, in terms of how old the people you target, right? So I have a client which tends to target senior executives, or at least older people, so 40 plus. In that case, I'd probably just put more than 10 years, and that would be the only filter. So I'm more likely to pick those people up. And you get the idea. But like you can go really specific with the list. And honestly speaking, from experience, I think you should spend more time on the list than you feel like you should, just because there's going to be a few filters which are going to make your life a lot easier in terms of finding the right people. So hopefully you found this useful. If you did, then do let me know. And that said,